Thank you for joining me on yet another YouTube video. My name is Shimyan. If you're new, please subscribe, turn on your post notifications, give me a huge thumbs up, and leave me a comment down below so I know who you are, and basically we can just have a little bit of a thing going there in the comments. So let's get into this video. Now, before we even get into the things that you and I do to kind of perpetuate and create a conducive environment for rape, we need to understand that rape is a show of power. The same way a rich person would flaunt their car, their expensive watch, their holidays, etc., is the same way rapists function. They do all they can to show that they have the capacity to override your own agency and autonomy. There's no other reason. This is just to show you that they can override your autonomy and your agency. Without this, there's no other motive to rape. And whilst other people can find that arousing, arousal is not the core part of why rape happens. Rape happens because they need to show power. So now that we have this and we don't have other funny definitions being brought up and other reasons, let's get into the things that we're actually doing as a society to help rapists. What we're doing right now is working in cahoots with rapists. And you know what's actually sad is that people can be anti the act of rape, but be pro the kind of culture and systems that make that event possible. And so we have so many people who will stand up and go onto the podium and speak about how they are not for rape, how they are so anti-rape, but they're actively creating situations and circumstances to help rapists function. And I want us to be able to reflect and think deeply about how these things happen and what our individual involvement in creating a society that is not safe for people without power aids rape culture. Now, whilst I'll be focusing on the event of rape as it is defined here, I'm going to be imploring you to also think of other less violent forms of sexual violence. And hopefully this kind of makes sense, because I think every single thing aids to that. None of them are better. I don't think anyone ever goes on a platform and says, oh, I'm better because there was no forcible penetration. It's all the same. It's all just as jarring and just as horrible. And so today I'm going to be talking about these things, and let's start now. Now, one of the things we do that aids rape is be rape apologists. Rape apologists are people who defend or insist on defending people they know to be sexual assaulters, like the woman who paid the bail for R. Kelly. For example, people who decide to defend their uncle, their husbands, their sons, whatever, who have done or who they know have committed a sexual offense for reasons best known to them. These people are rape apologists. And then there's also other kinds of rape apologists, being those who claim a victim of rape is at fault for the sexual assault. For example, if she had had too many drinks and was knocked off and a date rape occurred, she is definitely to blame for this. Why did she drink so much? This is all they will say the entire time. They never account for the fact that even if I drink myself into a coma, I should still not be raped. In the world we live in, you should not be raping someone simply because they've had a good time and they've had 10, 20 drinks. Also, if I was walking in the middle of the night and then I happened to be raped, still that would not be my fault. Walking outside at nighttime has never raped anybody. A rapist has always raped someone, so illogical, but they do it anyway. And these people work together with rapists to create the event that is rape and other forms of sexual assault. They believe in their hearts, even though they won't openly say it, that rape should happen and rape is plausible. Because if someone rapes somebody who had drunk themselves into a coma or into fainting or into unconsciousness, this means they believe there's definitely a margin where rape is plausible and acceptable. Now, victim shaming is a similar concept to the first idea. Here, they believe the victim is partially or fully at fault for the assault having happened. And it's very similar in that there's all this talk about you should have dressed like this, you should have been more careful. And what happens is victims tend to shy away from sharing their stories because they do not believe they're the perfect victims, or that their stories are believable enough, especially because of the kind of attitudes that rape apologists hold. And with victim blaming, you work together with the rapist to ensure that they can continue to do whatever work they do with no consequences, with no accountability. But instead, you ask that those who may be at risk of these kind of crimes move with more restriction instead of you removing those restrictions on those who are not harming anyone and stopping those who do the harming. For you to believe that someone can be partially responsible for rape or sexual offenses having happened towards them, it means you believe that there's definitely certain behaviors that warrant rape, and that means you believe rape is a form of consequence that is needed in society, and you actively believe in rape. Now, I've talked about the perfect victim before. The perfect victim is a fallacy that claims that for a person's experiences to be validated and for their identity to be respected and accepted as victim, they need to have been morally righteous, morally upright, perfect human beings without a single blemish in the world. If you do anything at all that can even allow them to consider whatever happened to have been an interpersonal issue instead of a systemic one, or a fight instead of an assault, for example, they will take that. So you have to have been in one of the most precarious, non-existent situations in the world for you to become a perfect victim. There's no other way. They need you to be a perfect victim, and that's who you are. And for many of us, including those who are watching this channel, need kind of something to validate them before they believe that people can actually be victims of sexual assault. And the perfect victim fallacy has been at work with one of the prominent religious leaders in this country, who has had multiple women throughout the years come up to the forefront to speak about how he had been sexually assaulting, raping, harassing them, or doing all sorts of unwanted sexual advances towards them in one of his guest houses, or whatever they're called. And each and every year, these women fail because they're not perfect victims. But when a man is that powerful, no victim can ever be perfect. All victims are imperfect simply because he's wealthy and powerful. We can always bring forth the idea that perhaps they wanted something from him, they wanted to rob him, they wanted to do something, or that they're unhappy because they've not been compensated for some kind of sex work. This man, because of his power, is unable to give us perfect victims because he's too powerful for such an idea to even function. There's always doubt. The women are always imperfect. And what people don't understand is when they hold these ideas, or when they hold victims to these impossibly high standards, they're actively working with rapists to kind of give them some credibility. If you need victims to tear themselves apart, to be perfect, blameless people, if you need us to live our lives with restriction just in case something terrible happens to us and we need to prove ourselves and stand on the podium as perfect victims that pass whatever impossible tests are in your head, you are a rape apologist, and you are definitely working in cahoots with rapists to allow the culture and the event to happen. Now, the next point is believing that rape can be a worthy consequence. People think this is inconsequential when they bring things like prison rape up. Because what happens in a system is if something is allowed elsewhere, it's definitely allowed here. So if women in prison can be exposed to certain kinds of violence, so will women outside of prison. If poor women can be neglected and be abused here, so will the abuse come to middle class and upper class women. These things are interconnected. And once you believe rape is a worthy consequence for one, you believe rape is a worthy consequence for all. And so in situations like prison rape, marital rape, and of course in countries where there are certain kinds of dress codes, believing that it can be a consequence for someone not behaving the way that you want is believing in rape as a practice everywhere. It's impossible to just believe rape happens here as if rape happens in a vacuum. Whoever you've given permission to harm here will harm here. The only way to be anti-rape is to be anti-rape completely. You can't flip-flop with this one. Are you anti-rape or are you pro-rape? those are your only options. The last point is slut shaming. Slut shaming refers to the stigmatization of women who show us their sexual capacity or who are sexually provocative. And most slut shamers refer to their religious or traditional moral code to defend, justify their actions, their prejudices, and their thought processes towards women who exist in their sexual capacity. And of course, there's so much to be said about the patriarchal nature of religion and tradition and how this also aids rape culture. But here with slut shamers, it kind of gives an allowance for people to harm, and it also gives rapists a kind of uh, legitimacy when they do the work that they do. I saw a TikTok once that spoke about the different parts in the brain and a study that had been done before that showed how men responded to women based on how they were dressed. Now, slut shaming is so dangerous because according to this study, if I find it, I'll link it below and I might put something here. Is that these men failed to see the humanity of women who were dressed decently. And so if a woman was dressed conservatively, the part of their brain that is responsible for recognizing human beings would light up. But if a woman was slightly underdressed or dressed in a way that was considered immodest, the part of the brain in these men that recognizes objects would light up. And so once someone ceases to be a human being, it means it becomes justifiable for them to receive pain, to be raped, and to be stripped of their agency and autonomy. And so if you believe somebody can be a slut, if you believe that somebody can dress in a way that it shows them to be promiscuous, undervalues them, etc., you actively support rape. That's it from me, you guys. Thank you so much for watching another video of mine. All right, guys, see you in my next video.